Good evening, friends. This is the Talking Devils podcast. I'm Wayne, joined by Dave Murphy to talk through Spurs 1, Manchester United 0 in Bilbao, the Europa League final. Didn't go the way that any of us wanted it to go. Critical match in Manchester United history, without doubt. I wrote an article on Substack yesterday, talking about the importance of it, but I don't think it was lost on anyone. Although I think some people tonight, judging by my tweet where I just said it was a damaging defeat, I don't think some people are thinking I'm overreacting by that. I'll go into why I think it's so damaging in a little while. Good grief, Dave. All the eggs were in this basket, right? Without doubt, without even apology, really. It's been very clear and I'm not a big fan of this. I said this before when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked in 2021. I'm not a big fan of writing off the season in November, and that's what it seemed like we were doing again. You sack a manager, it gives you an excuse not to back him with funds really in January, even though it's desperate for the club in terms of need for the squad. And you end up in a position where you basically saying the rest of the season means nothing. Unfortunately for United, that wasn't the case, especially this time around, because there's so much riding on it in terms of the club's future and in such a critical nature. And they didn't, obviously, I know they were saying, all right, the club were maybe 7 or 8 points off the top four or anything. That doesn't really matter when Ten was sacked, that kind of thing. It's just to do with the timing of it and saying, all right, well, it's so early in the season, but we're going to allow him the rest of the season. And then there's been the apologist nature with Amorim, and we can talk about that a little bit later. Like saying, oh, well, give him the preseason, blah, 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 and give him a full chance to work with Scott. But to have confidence in that, you want to see sign of improvement. We haven't seen anything apart from the Europa League. And if you wanted to believe in what was happening in the Europa League, you'd be saying, all right, well, there's signs of, good comebacks, good quality performances in there. You might also say that the standard of the opposition wasn't very good. Tonight, United faced a Premier League opponent and they played a Premier League kind of game. It was a very, very difficult performance to watch. It took a long time to get going, and even when they did get going, it wasn't really going. And the going got tough, and United had really little in response. United lost 1-0. We've seen that performance time and time again in the Premier League. And now it has come at a cost in the Europa League final when everyone was talking about how important that was. I think over the last week, even Amorim maybe got a little bit spooked and sort of tried to downplay how crucial it was after everyone had been talking it up. And we're going to pick through all of it. So get your comments and questions in. It's a very, very difficult one, Dave. How are you feeling? I mean, I know we're going to talk about Amorim, but talk about the game and tell me how disappointed you're feeling right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have saved our better performances this season in the Europa League. But that said, tonight was just another night of a poor performance, poor decision making by the manager. I meid the team he did put out was probably the strongest team he could have put out in recent weeks, considering the form of Ahmad and Mason Mount has really stepped up over the past, since he came back from his injury. So I don't have any issues with the team he put out, but once again, we can only play one way, and we're playing with players that can't play that way. And once again, he's we're going to move on to him in a bit, but his substitutions, surprised me initially because he brought on attacking players. That's not his MO, especially when we're losing. But then, he obviously gathered himself, and then he brought on a defender when we were still 1-0 down. I thought Mainu should have come on long before the defender comes on. It's mind-blowing that he constantly does that. It makes absolutely no sense. Same last week, losing 1-0, he brings on defenders. Like, this guy is clueless. And I know we'll get to talk about him later on, but Spurs didn't offer much. It was definitely a game of 16 versus 17. Because I don't think Spurs really offered anything. I think United, especially near the end, had obviously more of the chances as they pushed forward. But it was a bad performance all around. It wasn't the greatest cup final, and scrappy goal. I wouldn't blame Luke Shaw, to be honest, because it was just mayhem in there. But yeah, scrappy goal, and they won it, and Spurs are now in the Champions League, and they get that extra 100 million or whatever it is that and we're left way behind, going into a pre-season with 100 million, probably less of a budget. We better get that guy from Wolves to sign that contract pretty fast.
What do you make about the run of the game? Obviously, I messaged you quite early on. I said I'm concerned about Shaw and Arner here. But this is way before the goal, by the way. I messaged you, and I think Shaw was open. His use of the ball was like someone who hadn't played football for a year.
Yeah,
he was constantly putting players in danger, finding himself in bad positions. Maybe that we give credit to Spurs for that. I don't know, but I feel like it was a mistake of our own making. Really, he found himself in bad areas, and Arner wasn't. There was that time he came for the cross, which was, it was way out of his depth. He came way too early and almost cost us a goal. And it was horrendous. I mean, I know you're not blaming Shaw, but you look back, it's a comical goal to concede, right? I mean, if you're going to say anything, that's the goal that this final deserved, in a sense, between these sides. And if it was going to come from anyone, it was going to come from us, wasn't it? Like that, the goal itself.
I mean, we've seen this type of goal so often over the past couple of years, and unfortunately, it always seemed to bounce off Harry Maguire every single time. This time it was Shaw, and like I said, it was. I don't blame him for it, but he was poor. Onana is poor regardless. He either comes out too early or he doesn't move off his line. He's so shockingly bad. Technically bad for a goalkeeper. It's mind-blowing. He can't even do the basics right. He really can't. There was that time in the second half where Mazraoui was trying to shuttle the ball back to him, and he never moved off his line. He stood on his line, so he had to turn and try and clear it. It's just I'm sure though, and this is why we look so scared in defense, because they know that they have a goalkeeper behind them that is clueless. And that's what, in a weird about way, the blame could be put on Onana's craziness throughout the season for that type of goal, because it's just chaos. Nobody knows if the keeper's going to come or go. Nobody knows what the keeper's going to do. Is he going to mess it up? So I think a lot of that is down to the fact that they don't trust our goalkeeper, and these scrappy goals is, that's what that game, deserved. I mean, the only bonus out of it is that Spurs now can say they did have a better season than Arsenal, even though they'll finish probably in 17th, which will be funny to hear the meltdown from Arsenal fans. But let's be honest, they have, because they're in the Champions League and they've won a trophy. And the only thing that Arsenal have is they're in the Champions League, but both will get the same amount of money. So, silver lining and all that.
Well, you said about the lineup. Let's talk to that. I mean, there was a couple of surprises on the bench with Dalot and Xerxes seemingly rushed back. The big surprise, not really, not surprise. It was obvious that Højlund was going to start. The way that they've been playing him, Amorim's been trying to play him into form. I thought, I opined on Monday's podcast with Paul that I just thought, all right, benefit of hindsight considering the way that it went, but I felt like maybe taking him out of the firing line would have been better if you wanted to build his confidence, because he wasn't going to score in the last two games. In fact, his confidence must have been affected by that, and I actually thought for the first 5 or 6 minutes he was all right tonight. It was probably his first 5 or 6 minutes of the season because he held something up and then he ran into a good alley. But the rest of it, it was just the same player. And then the midfield selection. Normally this season, Amorim's reverted to that when it's not been working in games. He's put Bruno back. So that was an interesting one. Casemiro, I thought, was probably our best player tonight. I felt like what we've seen with Casemiro is probably atypical from that tonight, because you feel like we're in the weaker games where he's looked sluggish and poor is because of the weakness of the colleagues that he's got in the side. Well, tonight I thought all his passing and his positioning was spot on. But again, the players around him just aren't up to it. And he said that he felt the selection was all right. Would you have done? With this is hindsight. I just feel. Do you not feel that it would have been better to try something different than Højlund? Spring a surprise, play Garnacho through the middle.
I don't think so. Like I said, I think he picked the strongest team that he had available, and it takes a very, very brave manager to make some big drastic change like that. We just don't have a striker. I don't think Garnacho would be much better through the middle. And then he's open to heavy criticism if he does it, and it falls on his arse. But Højlund probably did better than what he has done in recent weeks. But my God, I don't know. That guy is shot. I mean, I don't understand what he's trying to do every time the ball comes to him. He doesn't jump. He just seems to lean over and fall down. He does that. It's mind blowing, man. It really is. And we've got too many players in our team that look like they don't know how to play football. I've never seen that like in my life.
One thing tonight that struck me from very early on was the appeals, constant appeals for decisions, and I felt like it was happening like 6 or 7 minutes in. Bruno, usually the catalyst for that sort of stuff, and he was again tonight. But I felt like why he was so needless. The game wasn't running away from us at that point, but it looked like a team who were looking for an advantage somewhere else. It looked like a team who weren't confident of winning the game of football. And I thought beforehand, if you looked at the mood in the camps, I actually thought Spurs looked the edgier of the two because Ange's spikier, Postecoglou, Amorim was quite relaxed. And I felt, oh, this might actually count in United's favour. But right from the off, they were just appealing for decisions all the time. It's like every single decision they were up in arms about, and it was frustrating to watch as a supporter because you're like, just get on with the game because you're actually delaying the momentum. They'll be quite happy to take the sting out of it. And also,
it got even worse when we were 1-0 down, and into the last 10-15 minutes, we were appealing for everything and arguing for 30-40 seconds at a time. I'm like, what are these clowns doing? We're wasting our own time here for a free kick that's definitely not happening. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think the referee was that bad. I thought he was actually pretty good. He let the game flow. Some of the frees some of the tackles that were flying around out there would have been, free kicks in the Premier League. And I thought, this guy wants to keep this game going. Because there was a couple of times where Spurs could have broke, or we could have broken, and he didn't call a foul for Spurs, and we got the momentum back again. And I just thought he was a good one, but I just thought the last 10-15 minutes, I was like, what are we doing here? If you're 1-0 up, do that. If you're 1-0 down, get on with it.
Yeah. No, to be fair. Robbie says here, was obvious after 20 minutes it wasn't working, too late from the manager. Was it 70 minutes the first sub? Something like that. It did feel like it was too late to make the changes at that point. I mean, even he did all right when he came on Xerxes. I'm not, criticizing.
I thought they did very well. I thought they really did very well. We probably got, statistically, we probably had more chances after they come on. So the 60th minute sounded about right, because 60 minutes in, you're still looking and going, dude, this wasn't happening after 40 minutes. It's definitely not happening after 60. I don't know why we waited so long. Like I said, the biggest surprise for me was he actually brought on attack-minded players and not defenders. But then, he went and brought on a defender then straight after that. It just makes no sense. If you're going to lose a cup final, you might as well lose a 3-0 than 1-0, but at least try. Bring it on. And people will have the argument, well, Dalot comes on and he attacks it. You know who attacks? An attacker attacks better than a wing back. So let's get as many people onto the pitch that have that attack-minded attitude. It's every week, this guy.
Yeah, I was surprised that they did that. I thought they would bring on Menu at that point when they brought Dalot on, because I thought they'd open up the right-hand side a little bit. What am I? I'm nobody really to make that point, but we've got a couple of comments here. We can analyse tactics as much as like this has been, but when you've got a striker that doesn't score goals and a goalkeeper that is prone to a mistake, then you're always going to run the risk of losing. Rick says Højlund is not the solution for United striker. Is Amorim using him to prove that? I don't think so. I think he used him because he wanted to win the game. The problem is also, I agree completely, a striker who doesn't score or a goalkeeper who's prone to a mistake, and both things happened again tonight. But the issue also is the system that gets the worst out of everyone in the side. It does
Yep.
nothing. I mean, the other thing is that, you can't legislate for Bruno having one of his worst games of the season in that moment in time. Maybe that is to do with the fact that he's playing in that position deeper early on when, you want him to take a risk, and you want, like at that moment in time when he's playing that early on, you want him possession to keep ticking over, and he's just not that kind of player. So United were already, I get the spirit behind it. It was kind of like, I'm bold, I'm going for a win here, but I mean, it just felt unnecessary because Bruno in that area, you're kind of losing something. I don't know. I can't really remember out off the top of my head whether or not he played in that position in Bilbao in the first leg. Just come through a couple of these comments as well. Good grief, there's a lot. We've got over 1,500 watching us tonight, guys. So get your comments and questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can, as long as we can tolerate talking about this. James said, manager waited too long to make changes. Bruno must have given away the ball 50% of the time in position. Keeper culpable for about 10 goals at least this season. That might be generous. Tony says, going to run away from the ball carrier, create an arc around the opposition box style. Phil was hopeless. I've been watching most of my life. I'm now 72. It was so bad a performance I gave up with it. Also, we got Dan, who went with Alex, his son. Did the coach trip yesterday from Old Trafford. I was there just after he set off. All that trip down there. Good, very long coach trip home now. That defeat and lack of Champions League football next season will surely speed up the departure of a few more players, either on loan or permanently. How the hell Mount started the game is beyond me. That's another thing.
I don't know. I think he played his way into the team he has, and Garnacho was always going to be the. Let's be honest, Garnacho hasn't really done anything in the past 5-6 months. He's been given ample opportunities. I will say he has improved with some of his final ball, but those couple of goals on Mount got, and then he followed that up with a really strong performance. He played himself into that team, so it's only Garnacho's fault that he wasn't in it. It's just, like I said, I personally thought that was the strongest team. I was happy to see that team. I really was. I was happy to see Mount, and obviously Ahmed, who was clearly our best player with Bruno, and Casemiro. My biggest fear now is that Fernandes goes, screw this, I'm done. That's not beyond the realms. It really isn't. And who would actually criticize him if he walked away now? Because he's not stupid. He sees what's going to come in the summer. All of a sudden, like we've just said, and we'll talk about it when we get to Amorim. All of a sudden now, your budget's cut in half.
Yeah. Jay Panda says it should be Ugarte and Casemiro should have started the game. Worrying thing is
that is a good call because Spurs has a very strong midfield physically as well. My only concern was Ugarte may have got they got the Harry Maguire throughout the game. I'm pretty sure they would have got to Ugarte as well because he doesn't really have that I'll take it easy and I won't go around and kick someone in the air. So he's one of my favorite players at United right now because of his attitude, but I think the team that he put out was probably the best team he could have put out. I just felt like, as Rob said earlier on, he waited too long to change it. He really did.
Yeah. Adam says worrying thing is Amorim's not showing us any signs new players will change this. I thought someone said earlier that Dogu was one of our better players. I thought he was really poor tonight. And I don't think he's really shown a lot. He's shown a lot of good athleticism, but when he gets into areas, he's been poor defensively, and I think he's not really.
I think positionally he goes wandering. There's times where he just disappears. But I personally think that the reason for that is there's not enough players in our team that's trying to play the system that he was brought in for. So at times he looks headless. I think with better players around him that know that system. But the sooner we get onto Amorim and talk about this, system that we're supposed to be able to play, the better.
All right. Let's talk about him then. What next for him? I know you're going to say time to walk or time to be sacked. So, floor's yours. I know you've been feeling that way for a while anyway, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
change your opinion from what you've seen tonight.
Okay, grab yourself a coffee. The problem is that, I want to start out by saying I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good manager, but he's in the wrong team. That's as simple as that. And if we didn't have all these financial rules and we had $1 million, $1 billion, he could easily take us to the promised land with his style of football, because I really like that style of football he's trying to play. But he can't play it with this team, and he won't be able to play it with this team. And now after tonight, he certainly won't. It'll be a slower process to get to that. And I don't believe we should give him the time. And the reason is that even though he has one system to play, we've lost 16 games since he's come in. 16 or 17 games, yeah. Yeah, 16 games we've lost. 16 games. They put up a side-by-side comparison of him and Gary Neville at Valencia. And Gary Neville had 32% of win ratio. Amorim has 23%. Yeah. And that's even by the law of averages, he should have picked up a few more wins. You know what I mean? But we're getting absolutely mullered by teams at home like Crystal Palace and Bournemouth and Forest, and it's just embarrassing. I mean, we beat Southampton. You and I were at that game, but there's no way we should have beaten Southampton. If I was a Southampton fan, I would have went home crushed because they played us off the park. This guy doesn't know what he's doing with this team. And people can say, well, I hear all the excuses. He came in halfway through the season. He didn't. He came in November. Okay. When he came in, we were 7 points off Champions League. I know you said that earlier. We nearly got relegated. There's only one man that's to blame for all this. It's him. Do the players take some of the blame? Of course they do. We're missing sitters week in, week out. But him as the manager has to change that. He has to change it. He can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And then there's just so much wrong with him right now. Every time I turn on the TV, he's on Sky Sports doing an interview. It's constant. It's like, dude, seriously. I know the interview might only take an hour a day and you've got X amount of hours, but it sends the wrong signal. And then every time you get on, you complain and complain and complain and tell us how crap we are and tell us how terrible. Any job in the world, if your manager or your boss is standing up there saying, oh, yeah, the guys that work for me, they're all shit.
Yeah.
What do you think those players are going to think? And, then thrown out that, oh, well, if I'm not the right man, let me go. Seriously, do it. I'm sure you're not going to cry into your pillow when you get like 10 million payoff. But he's not the right man for the job, Wayne. And losing tonight, everything was on tonight for me to get some kind of belief on, okay, let's see what he does now with a budget. But now we're going to give him money and we'll sack him by October. I'll guarantee you.
Yeah.
And then the next manager that comes in will have players going, he'll have players that are like, well, I don't play this system. Unfortunately, he has to go. And if someone's saying, well, who do we bring in? There's a million managers out there. There's not just 10. Just go out and get a manager that suits our style of play. Have a plan, because we obviously didn't have a plan when we brought this guy in. And I'm tired of hearing people saying he wanted to come in the summer. What was going to happen within 6 weeks of a preseason and 2 or 3 players? He wasn't going to turn this around. Unfortunately, he's come into a place where he needs to replace 70 to 80% of the team in order to play his system. And that's not going to happen. It may be over 2 or 3 years. And we will win the championship, with those players. We just won't win the Premier League. This is not getting any better. I mean, we were at the West Ham game last week. It was so bad. It was laughable. And to me, he just looks like he's like, well, these are not my players. This is not my stuff. Dude, you're a professional manager. Change it. Tweak it until you can get players in. Every other manager does it. Most managers have a plan B. But he's clueless. We're chasing games and he brings on defenders. It makes no sense at all. It really does. It really does. He's not the man for the job, and we should just rip off the Band-Aid, because we'll get beat by Aston Villa on Sunday. And then that will be 17 defeats since November. We should have never got into double figures before we realized this guy wasn't it. He wasn't it with this team. I'm not, like I said, it's very difficult because, his Sporting team played very well and they played a nice brand of football. This is ridiculous that they brought him in.
I think they said on commentary on TNT tonight that it was the 31st time United had conceded the first goal as well in a game this season. And pretty much a lot of those were under, some of them were under Ten Hag as well, of course, but plenty of them under Amorim. Not a fault that he fixed at all. Really, none of the faults that were there in the team is fixed, and nothing that you
Nothing has improved. What has improved since he came in? Nothing.
No, let's be fair. I would say that Ahmad looks better in this system than he has in any other system. But I'm not sure that's worth investing in a manager for a long term. I just there's a lot of comments.
Ahmad was here. Ahmad for me was always a very good player. Even when he was out on loan, I thought that this guy is going to be really, really good. I know he didn't have a great time at Rangers. Ten Hag obviously didn't give him enough opportunities. But if we're basing that, I know I asked the question, what's improved, and you said Ahmad, but Ahmad was a player just waiting. That's all. He got his opportunity. But every other player and everything else about that club and that team has gone drastically backwards on them.
Yeah, I'm not making the evidence is there. I'm not arguing with you about it. Afan says Spurs marked Ahmad out of the contest and we had no plan B. Bruno didn't turn up. Shame we lost to a bad goal. Was there any surprise in that, though? I mean, the way that we play. JS says we will take a number of years to build our team to make us competitive on a consistent basis towards the top of the league. McJD says if Amorim turns out to be a top manager, it will be somewhere else. He'll be giving interviews about the mistakes he made at United, with the making of him. Kevin says Rude wouldn't have done worse with us. Should have kept hold of him and not switched to a new manager. I mean, I get the point. I get the point. Just, can we talk about your new book instead? Of course we can. Dave won't like that though. Yes, the only thing worse than losing the Europa League final is listening to me waffling on about Jimmy Hogan for 20 more minutes.
I've been listening to that for 24 months.
Kevin says, on the bright side, do we think the Glazers will finally stop and do one? I'm going to come on to that in a little while. Rick says it was available. Robbie, all jokes aside, it's going to be so grim the next few months. We all need to look out for each other. Yeah, I think it's really bad timing. Like fans, there are a lot of people online in the online community who are taking it really difficultly. So, yeah, we're all here to chat. Anyway, we'll be here with the pods. Might be mental health podcasts over the summer. I don't know. Good grief, the way that this is going on. I'm not saying that flippantly, by the way. James says 3-4-3 with the same players, expecting different results is the definition of insanity. All right, so we'll talk about what's next for the players and what's next for the club. What's next for the players, Dave? Because, I mean, one of the things that could be said is one of the things I thought about before this, because I was writing that article yesterday on Substack, and I was like, do you know what? There's a theory here that says these players are playing for a future that they're not going to be a part of, right? Will they be properly motivated to do that? I don't think that motivation's a problem with this team. I just think lack of ability is. But United are left in the same problem that they've been for a number of years, is that they've got a lot of senior players who nobody else wants on big contracts, and they cannot get rid of them. And now, I'm not trying to be rotten about players who've served well this season. Maguire's done better than expected, for example. Lindelof came in and did a job when everyone expected he should have gone. No, he did. I'm not saying that he's done well. What I'm saying is he came and did a job.
Traffic cone would have put
let's be serious about this. Professional football. I'm not talking. I'm low standards accepted, right? He still came in and did a job. He wasn't terrible, but he's nowhere near the standard of what we need to move forward. And I think when you look at the likes of Maguire, who's done an acceptable job, you look at the likes of Shaw, who the time has been and gone for Luke Shaw. I mean, the idea of him starting a European final for United in 2025. Seriously, Maguire, Luke Shaw starting a European final for United in 2025. And then there's the other players who recently arrived. who, United won't be able to write off fast enough, like Ireland and Xerxes. Because let's be, if we have to be really brutal about this, look at where United are in the table. You might take Bruno aside from this. You might say Garnacho and Mainu have got a lot of potential. And let's not talk about the kids who came in this season, like Heaven or someone like that. How many? You could say 3 or 4 players who are currently contracted to the club could do a job in a side that wins the title, in a squad, not in the first team necessarily. And the amount of turnover that's necessary for that. I mean, we'll talk about the club's ability to do that in a moment, but for the players, Dave, I mean, I don't know what this summer holds because, first of all, United have got to manage this turnover of getting these players out, because let's be brutal about this. We are not going to succeed with this squad. So what do? We can't invest too much in what's coming tomorrow because a lot of these players are not ready. A lot of great players in the youth team. Obi being a great example of someone who is pulling up trees at that level, but he's not yet ready to make that step up. We've seen that this season, but the disparity in the quality of the squad and the lack of options of quality in different areas has meant that he's needed to be called up to play minutes that he's not yet ready for, and it's been unfair. And maybe as a consequence of that, his own potential or his own career path has been stalled a little bit because of the pressure that's been put on him. Hopefully not being stunted, hopefully not being derailed completely, but he has still been stunned. He's still been affected by what the pressure that's been put on him. You couldn't put that same pressure on the likes of Lacey or Musa, these youngsters who've been doing well. You don't want to rush their development and put them into a side that they're not ready for. But these, the rest of the first team players, what do we do? What do we do from this point? Because, I mean, the takers, you've got to generate what your ideal situation, not yours, but the ideal situation surely in this window is to get rid of as many of the squad as possible and bring in a big turnover of players who aren't flashy. Bring in 7 or 8 players with the profile of Delap from Ipswich who aren't flashy, who are just going to work hard. Do you know what I mean? That's what United have got to do this summer, and I don't know if they've got the ability to turn around the squad. Regardless of who's manager, that's what they've got to do.
Then the difficult part then is getting players that can play that system at that, bringing them in and playing that system.
Dave, I'm talking regardless of the system, regardless of the manager. So let's say the manager's here or not, or that he's playing that system or not. Let's say it's a different manager. Just talking about the players and the players that are available too. Let's say a new manager comes in. You've got to move these players on and bring in players. And
but I think everybody knows that. But the bottom line here is that money comes into the equation every single time. I mean, we're looking at. I read a report the other day that Marcus Rashford is point blankly refusing to take any type of pay cut to leave Old Trafford. And I'm sorry, but that's just human nature. I don't blame Marcus Rashford. We give him a contract for 350 grand a week for the next 2 or 3 years. Why should he take a pay cut? I don't get that, and these are the problems that we have. And if local boys or Jim wants to get United back to where we belong, maybe he has to put his hand in his pocket and get these players off the books and pay them off and get rid of them. That's the only way that's going to happen for your plan to come into play. That's the only way, because no one's going to pay Marcus Rashford 350 grand a week. It's not going to happen. It really isn't. And no one's going to pay, some of these players are on ridiculous amounts of money and are bang average. So if the question is, how do we solve this? Well, Jim has to go into his pocket and pay it out of his own pocket and say, move on, here's a check. That's the only way you're going to do it, to gut the team, to gut it, to get rid of them. But that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to hold on to this clown, and then we're going to go into the summer, and he's going to be given as much money as possible that we can afford, and he's going to blow it on players that are not going to be able to improve this team to a level that's acceptable. And right now, the level of acceptability for me is top 10. And we won't even get that. We won't. So I don't know why we're going to give this guy money when He's walked in, and it's not his fault that he's come into a team that can't play his system. You know what I mean? It's really not. And he's 40 years of age. He got an offer to manage one of the biggest clubs in the world. He's not going to say no. So he came thinking that he could fix these players and get us over the line till the summer. But the bottom line here is, Wayne, we will be bottom of the table come September. There is absolutely no evidence to show us that we won't be. Because our win run was one this season. We never won 2 games in a row. I mean, Southampton, teams that are way below us in size and stature would sack managers for less. This guy is not the right man, and we need to blow the whole thing up. Because if we don't and we keep this guy, he's going to get... I said it, I think, to Paul and you on the show in around January, February. This guy will get us relegated. He will. Yeah. Because if you get into that bottom 3... I'm sitting here praising Ten Hag for getting us a couple of wins, early on. So we didn't get relegated, but there's nothing to show me that we won't be. And that sounds insane, but it's not. It sounds insane that if you had said when he came in that, when we had that draw at Ipswich, that, you know what, things are going to get better. If you'd have said to me, we're going to end up in 16 to get beaten by a very poor Spurs side and also lose, another 13 or 14 games, I would have said you're insane. That's not going to happen, because no manager of Manchester United will let that happen, because they'll have to change their system. But he refuses to change it. And I don't know why the club haven't pulled him in and said, you got to do something. This is ridiculous.
It brings us to the running of the club, because the mandate that was put down from Ratcliffe and through the messages of Wilcox and Browder was that we are going to give the club an identity and we're going to change what we are. And that,
they did that all right.
Yeah,
but not in the way that they hoped.
But they talk about the past and saying, they made the past feel like a dirty word, and I feel like no, it's very dangerous territory to do that with United, because you've got to really respect what you're coming into. And I feel like they thought that what they were disrespecting was the failures, which is fair enough. But I think what they actually ended up disrespecting was the heritage of the club, and they tried to facilitate this big disconnect. There's no evidence to say that a change in system to this kind of thing works. I think maybe they thought a little bit too smart. There's no evidence to say that it works in England, let alone at United. Certainly at some clubs it does, because, the smaller clubs can spring a surprise, and you might say, all right, well, United have fallen enough that they don't deserve to be spoken about in the same breath as the big clubs. But the problem is that United are still an institution. They've still got their own fans. They've still got the glare of the media. So whether or not they're a current ability to be able to compete at the top level is one thing, but the pressure that's on them and the spotlight that's on them is still the same thing. It's still exactly the same thing, the ability to be able to perform on a week in, week out kind of thing. And that system just doesn't lend itself to attacking at Old Trafford. Not to bang a drum that I was saying in November, because I wanted to be proved wrong by this. This isn't I told you so, but I was saying, like, with concern, because the book had just finished. I'm like, I'm going to be promoting the book soon. But the kind of last thing that I forewarned in there was that this system doesn't work, and it's too pragmatic to work at United, because Ferguson even said it in 1990. This is going back, and I know systems change and times change and eras change, but he talked about playing a 3-man defense, and he was saying it doesn't work because it gives opponents too much time on the ball, and it staggers the build-up, and United need to be swifter with the build-up. So Robbie's saying that Amorim's now on TNT talking, so maybe he'll give us some comments for what he's saying before we close out. So let's talk about the what's next for the club with that thing in mind with Ratcliffe, because you were saying there about he's going to have to dip into his pockets and maybe write off some of the contracts and stuff like that. The big thing is that people aren't seeming to understand the gravity of the seriousness with this result for this season. It cost the club 80 to 100 million pounds, which they were banking on in order to progress next season. In case you missed it, United don't have cash. Ratcliffe even came out and admitted we do not have
Any cash in the bank?
He said we will be out of it by the end of the year. So unless he dips into his pockets, it, by the way, isn't permitted to do that by the PSR regulations. So United, the reality of the situation is Garnacho and Omenu will probably be sold for a large fee this summer, and that money will be used to reinvest in the squad. I've been saying this for maybe 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure I would sacrifice either of those players for the future of where this manager's taking us. Even when we had this conversation, we were arguing, Dave and I, we seem like the best of friends now. We were having a big argument about this over the weekend, where we were talking about Garnacho in particular, about his value to the club. I was defending it because I was like, all right, I really don't want to see a player sold for this kind of direction when you might come back and bite us in the thing. But also, what's that £60 million going to get us? I don't think it's going to get us a player better than Garnacho. Or maybe say, for the sake of PSR reasons, let's say that frees up £120 million, whatever fee we're getting for him. I still don't see that takes us any further than it would with us having him. I don't see that the gamble's necessarily worth it. I know at the time you were arguing about Garnacho's lack of potential, or like you would move him on. But the point, you see the point that I was making. We could both see the point that we're making, really. But where we were with that is that these are gambles that the club they wouldn't have to make, really. We shouldn't be talking about Garnacho being sold we should be talking about, all right, we'll just keep him for another season, and if he's not good enough, then we just move him on. But the financial situation of the club is we'll probably have to move him on, and the purpose of doing that will be to finance whatever's happening with the manager. And there's no guarantee. Let's say if there's 2 or 3 more Dogus who play 6 months like Dogu's played. Do you know what I mean? I'm not being too much critical to Dogu, but you see where I'm coming from with that. Is that Can we have 3 Dogus playing the way that he's played for 6 months? I don't know if that's a good thing. It's certainly not worth sacrificing a player like Garnacho for. Anyway, that's my point on the players. The thing that was next for the club is that when I'm talking about how critical that 80 to £100 million is it comes down to then transfer policy for the summer. It comes down to the staff. Can the club, will they see another turnover of staff? Will they make more staff redundant? The likelihood and the fancifulness of that stadium plan that looked great 3 months ago, are the club going to be able to finance $1.5 billion for that? All of these things that were on the projection for the way that the club is currently operating just doesn't seem likely. You got people who are losing their season tickets, old timers who made 10 years left as a season ticket holder. Less than that if the season ticket holder queue dwindles to the point where you move to the new stadium. So there's no value in sacrificing their loyalty just for the sake of an extra few quid. But the club are that hard up for money that's what they're doing with that at the moment. And all of that is being blamed on the economic situation of the club. So now they're in a much worse position than they would have been if they had won that thing, because that money wasn't guaranteed and they needed that money in order to the money that people said, it doesn't really matter how low down we're finishing the league, but there's probably another 30 million in prize money that we've lost from finishing 7th to 16th. There's a lot of money that's lost in there as well. So much money has been lost in the gamble of this Europa League chase, which wouldn't have really, we wouldn't have been competitive in the Champions League as well. People keep forgetting that.
But I don't think he sacrificed the league for the Europa League. He just couldn't win a game. I don't buy that at all. He just couldn't win. Now, maybe near the end when we got to the semi-final and the finals, he was like, okay, I'm going to rest some players. But every manager does that because they don't want to take the risk. This guy can't win a game. He's absolutely horrendous. And as for, local boy come good, when he was looking to purchase the club, I made the comment, careful what you wish for. These guys are businessmen. That's what they are. When people are self-made like him, he's driven to make money. That's all. He doesn't care about Manchester United. The guy tried to buy fucking Chelsea. He just cares about money, and that's why he went in there and he gutted the whole club. And now, instead of a parade, he was going to put on a barbecue. It's just stupid, shitty, stupid things like that. And then, again, hindsight's a great thing. There's not many people out there that can afford to buy Manchester United. We were in an absolutely horrible position. We were damned if we do, damned if we don't. And, if someone didn't come in like Ratcliffe to try and help us out, we'd be stuck with the Glazers. And I believe it'd probably be even worse now, especially from a financial standpoint. It would. So that was the only good thing that Jim's come in, and he's pumped money into the club.
Yeah.
And as he said in that interview, if I hadn't have pumped 300 million or whatever, then we would have had no money. And then what happens then is that the Premier League get involved and you start getting point stocked. If you go into administration, and as laughable as people may think that is, when Liverpool were under the American ownership, the previous one, they were 48 hours away from administration. That's what they were before Fenway came in. That's how easy this happens. Yeah. And I know you had sent out a few tweets earlier in the week and today saying that today's game is such a massive game in the history of Manchester United. I don't think people really got that. Because once you get into the Champions League, your cash flow goes up by 100 million. UEFA hand you 100 million. It's guaranteed hard cash. Now that's gone. And we don't even have the revenue of European football next year. I can't wait for people to say, we can concentrate on the league. It's like, really? It's shit. I just want to know when it's going to start getting a little bit better.
Don't worry. I've got a silver lining coming up. Don't worry about that. Kim says the starting lineup was clearly the wrong one tonight. The system was obviously not working, but shouldn't the players have enough quality to be able to adapt? Whilst I don't think the vast majority of the players are of the calibre we should have at United, they're surely not worse than the likes of Wolves, Everton, and West Ham, who are above us. I mean, yeah, I agree.
So what does it come down to? She makes a very, very good point there that these players are better than the players that are at Wolves and Everton and Chris. I'd even go as far as Crystal Palace. I know they won the FA Cup and they are a decent side. So what does it come down to? It comes down to the man that picks the team. It comes down to the man that's managing these players. That's what it comes down to. Arne Slot came into Liverpool with a really decent side, and he romped the league. Romped it. Now, I know there's other factors in there. There's stuff like, he got lucky with injuries and stuff like that. But people thought they would finish mid-table. And he came in. So when people argue it's the players, it's not the manager, it can be both. It really can. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, it is. And in our case right now, it is.
Yeah. Robbie says, I'm really enjoying the book, man. Thanks. I'm get my
of all the comments that's up here, I knew it was coming.
I found the most value in that one, to be honest with you. So the point about the Ratcliffe and everything like that. If there's a silver lining to take from tonight is maybe the responsibility has been put on supporters, right? It's been, and the staff of the club. It's been said, all right, well, you've got to lose your jobs and you've got to have your tickets raised. Because the marginal games that Dave Brailsford was meant to be bringing on the pitch, we can't find them. So we're going to find them off the pitch from you guys. Now, let's be serious for a moment. Right, though that can't happen. It can't be. You can't continue to do that because it's not sustainable. You can't continue to raise prices and you can't continue to lose staff. So, without Champions League football, the only thing that makes any sense in the next 18 months is to understand what that takeover process looks like now, what the completion of it looks like, because we were told that this was 30% on the way to a full takeover. That has to be expedited, or at least it needs to be communicated when that's going to happen, because you can't continue to make the people who are at the club or serving the club like supporters are, you can't continue to make them pay the price. They cannot pay the price for what happened this season. That is intolerable and it's unthinkable, right? It cannot be that the supporters continue to pay the price for that. The hardship of these few months, so they said, all right, we're going to bite the bullet. It's going to be difficult for a few months, but things will continue to get rosy. Well, that picture has to be made to look rosy. Now it can't be done on the team, because the team failed to do that. Unfortunately, we wanted them to succeed, but they didn't. So the way that needs to be done, it needs to be facilitated by the removal of that debt, because that is what's causing United to be lagging. It's the cost of that debt that's leveraged on the club. It's the cost of the Glazer takeover and what still hurts us today. So the only thing that can resolve the issue for United in terms of financial burden is the complete takeover. That's the only thing that can be done. So what needs to actually happen in the next couple of months is the responsibility needs to go to Ratcliffe and Ineos and Trollers Limited or whatever it is and communicate what that process now looks like to facilitate that full takeover and when that timescale is likely to be. Because you can't talk about things like a stadium that United cannot afford to build when you're talking about laying off staff and you're talking about a summer that was critical where you're not going to be able to bring in players, or you're going to ask us to be tolerating selling a Garnacho or Menu in order to facilitate players to fill a system that might not even work by November, like we're talking about. It's not fair to suppose to put them through that. So you need to take the responsibility and talk through what that ownership process looks like from now on, because the Glazers aren't going to put in any money. They've made that clear throughout 20 years of ownership. The next part of that procedure is completing that takeover. There seems to be some plan in place for that, right? That was structured like said, all right, you can only put in so much money by. It was like another 100 and something million by last December, which he did do. And all right, he's got no obligation now because he's not the owner of the club. He owns 28%. The debt's not his. He's not got any obligation to clear that debt. But the full takeover, Ineos can easily absorb that debt and it can get wiped off because it'll be Ratcliffe's to own and Ratcliffe's to wipe out. That's the easiest. That's the only way. That's the only way now for the next 2 years that United will be able to sort of compete quickly. Because if we're being serious, funding that new stadium and what they said, competing for a league title by 2028, that's not going to happen the way that things are. Even if they said we want to back the manager 100% and they had complete conviction in that, they have to then communicate what that full takeover process looks like, right, Dave? I mean, that I'm not being fanciful with that. I think that's the realistic reaction to what we've seen tonight is that needs to be happening. That needs to be the responsibility.
It's not going to happen, though. He's not going to come out. And, I mean, in the beginning, the communication was okay, but now it just, we don't hear from him anymore. He's probably realized the shit show that he's walked into. But all the lies that he told in the beginning about being more transparent and being the local boy and he wants to put Manchester United up where it deserves to be, it's all just bullshit talk to get people through the door, to get his customers coming back every week. But every single thing that he does is takes us further away from the club. I mean, we've all seen and read and heard the stories about, like you mentioned earlier on, supporters that have had their season ticket for decades and they're getting turfed out, so they can sell seats at 600 quid a pop. Yeah. on one-off attendances from people. I get it. I don't have anything against people that want to come and pay all that money. I really don't. It's if they want to pay it, they pay it, but that's not sustainable if you're in the championship. So he needs to do something fast. And I know we laugh about that, but we aren't even past the traditional, relegation tally of 40 points, and there's one game to go. We are just lucky. Two things we're lucky with. Amorim didn't start the season, and three other teams are even shittier than we are.
Yeah.
We're just well, four if you include Spurs, but then again, Spurs beat us tonight. But this is dangerous times, and we could easily get into that relegation dogfight. And you see it down the years, and players even say it when big teams get relegated. I'm always interested to hear from a player's point of view how it happened. And they all say the same thing. When you get stuck down there, everything goes wrong. Everything.
Yeah.
On the training ground, on the pitch, it's just everything goes wrong. You've ran over 10 cats. And that's my fear. So can you imagine, this system or not this system, but this whole shit show in the championship with zero money and zero money coming in? It's a very, very serious possibility.
Yeah,
it really is.
I genuinely do believe that that's the only sort of way out of that this summer is to sort of communicate that pathway for a takeover, because if you don't do that, you are going to get there's already discontent there anyway. There's discontent because there's no conviction in the you can't say for certain that we all believe in Ratcliffe's choices because it's so far not working. But the prevailing point has got to be that the dire financial situation that the club are in can only now be rescued by removing that debt.
But that's the only way forward. That is the only way forward. But it's a very, very, very expensive forward. And it's not going to work the way he's doing it now. It's just not going to work. It'll take a decade. And even at that, it may not even happen,
If it takes that long without removing the debt, you've got to then have value in all of your decisions being right. All of them have got to be right. All the managers that you select, all the players that you buy, your hit rate for success has got to be so high, and then your success on the pitch has got to be so high that then the kit deals, the television deals, the success, the rewards for the financial rewards for winning trophies are so great that the cost of the debt doesn't hamper you, and it just that point's already gone for United. They've already crossed that bridge. And I think that's what people don't seem to realise. I mean, they already crossed that bridge when they failed to qualify for the Champions League in the season when Rangnick was, when he oversaw that period where he was talking about major surgery, which I felt was completely unnecessary. Now, he might have been right about the major surgery, but the way that he went about it, that we plummeted through the division. We didn't qualify for Europe. We didn't qualify for the Champions League. And everyone was like, all right, that's a fresh start. But I don't think people realised late in that window, we ended up putting Anthony and Casemiro on credit cards. We're still paying for them now. That's the kind of moment that we're in at the moment. We're not able to afford to fund the kind of summer spend without sacrificing some of the identity. There's some of the good things that we've got, like regardless of whether or not you think it's time for him to go, Garnacho and Menu. Those players are the future that we would usually have patience and give them another 1 or 2 years. And now, it's just terrible. And what an absolute nightmare to end the season. I'm just going to go to a couple of the comments before we close off. Weird to think Ten Hag's wins earlier this season might have kept us up. I've not brought my little one to a game since the idea of charging silly prices for under 16s came into play. Took my nephew to 2 games this season. We lost them both. He's very happy with me for that. Hasn't seen a goal from United this season. When have I seen a goal from United this season? I'm not sure. Have you seen a goal from United this season, Dave?
I've seen it. I've seen a few, but I've obviously seen a hell of a lot more.
Again, too few to mention. Robbie says, thank God Van Nistelrooy got those few wins. Yeah, these were the moments, right? There was 2 wins over Leicester, was it? Van Nistelrooy. Villa game will be an interesting atmosphere. Well, there'll be protests and that we already knew that was going to happen, but they'll be very much intensified after tonight. When Andy says, no money, no time, stadium, more debt. Where next? Great point to end the podcast on. I'll be back. Yeah, in case you haven't realised, Dave has got us nailed on for the championship next season. Anyway, I'll be back after the final game of the season, probably with Paul. We'll work out what's happening next week because I'll be with Dave and probably taking him to the airport on Monday morning when I'm meant to be doing the pod. Robbie says we still love them. We do still love United. Look,
that's at the crux of it all here, Wayne. Is that football in Europe is a religion, in South American places like that. It's a very unique thing that you get hooked on, and clubs know this. This is why we're not supporters to them anymore. We're customers, and they know it, and they know we'll still come back, and they know we'll moan and complain and moan because it's the hope that kills you. You're thinking it's going to get better. It's going to get better. I mean, it does. That's just it. Like you said, I'm going to the Villa game this weekend. what the fuck is going through my head? Having to get on a plane early in the morning to fly over there again for like the 12th time this season, to just come away disappointed. But then excited to go the next time, and then 40 minutes in, go, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
But that's it. That's what brings us back. It's just that, like I said, the hope that at some point it will flip, and we've seen the bad times, we've seen the good times, and now we're in the bad times again. So
yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? I know you said there we're customers, and maybe we are, but I think I have to keep reminding myself of this, but also anyone who listens and watches. So it's like, I know it's despondent, I know it's difficult. This is like a very, very difficult way to end the season, where all of the hopes through a terrible season, one of the worst we've ever lived through, were pinned on this one game, and then it happened that the game was a reflection of what we saw this season.
So who's crazier, the club or the supporters? Because that game it is a game that we've seen so often this season, and over the last few seasons. It's just an absolutely ridiculous goal to give away, and we were the better team on the night by far. Spurs didn't really offer anything, especially after they scored. They just sat back. But that just, if you want to say to somebody, hey, how did your season go? Just show them that game and say, this was our season. And it's been like this for a few years now. This is it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like Robbie says there, lads, you've got family and friends, so it's all right, we go again. But I mean, this is the point I was going to say, is that this is the point I tried to make in the article that I said I wrote this week, and something I've said throughout this season. It is difficult, right? These are the difficult times. I've tried to say to my nephew, like, these are tough times, but when we win, you'll remember these tough times, and you say, all right, well, this is the journey that we went through. Some of us went through it when we were younger in the 80s, too young to really remember them as hardship, but we went through, and then we enjoyed this glaring success. But the success or failure, your relationship with the football club, whoever you support, but we're all the extras support United, is your relationship. It's your memories. It's the games you've been to. It's the games you've watched. It's the people you've watched them with. It's the moments that you've shared. That doesn't belong to anyone but you and your connection to the club. It's not, so you can talk about how difficult it is with Amorim. You can talk about your disconnect with the players, and you can talk about how disenfranchised you are with the ownership group. But that doesn't change what your relationship is with the club, and it shouldn't affect that. So when you talk about being disillusioned, remember, you still love the club in the way that you always did, and that doesn't change. That's not taken for granted by anyone else. That's your relationship with the club, and it means something to you, and that's what it means to us. Like, it's been terrible watching United this season, but my mate Dave has been back home from California for a couple of years, and I've been to watch most of the games with him. I've been to watch some of the games with my nephew. And they're the crap to watch, but I've enjoyed those moments. No, you know what I mean?
No, it is. It is 100%. And like I said, it's one of those things that we always still come back to, and we got a wake up call during COVID, when people weren't allowed to go to games, and then you would read some of the tragic stories when grounds started opening up again, and people would talk on Twitter about, hey, the guy that I used to sit with for the game for the last 15 years. The only reason I know him is we sit together at a game. The fucking guy died during COVID, and then that connection goes away. I don't get upset about United, even though it might sound like I do. It doesn't ruin my weekend anymore. It doesn't ruin my day. But it doesn't. My connection with the club, my love for the club is still as strong as it was from the 80s onwards. But that could go against us, because they do know there's a hardcore at every single club that's going to come back no matter what shit gets thrown at us. Because, as you said, and you put it beautifully, that's our connection with the club that can't be taken away. So,
well, Spurs won, Manchester United 0, and it was all a big bag of crap, and that's the end of that season. But we'll still be back over the summer to talk about it guys, really appreciate you. I mean, there's 2,200 of you watching this, which is a massive thing for us. We're on live screen, considering that we're not like.
I wonder how much of those 2,200 don't have a television right now because of what happened tonight. So maybe that's why they're online.
Smash it in. No, but I mean, considering we're not clickbaiters and we don't rage bait at stuff like we're not angry at players, it means a lot to us that like we're very, very grateful for the audience that we do have throughout the pod on the season anyway. But coming into after a game like this, and I'm just lucky to talk about it with my best mate and sort of get it off my chest a little bit. But for many of you to have joined us has meant a lot. So thanks for that. This will be live as well. Sorry, I'll be putting it on the audio feeds for the podcast as well on Thursday morning. So all the stuff that you're listening to live in the moment is obviously in the heat of the moment after the final whistle. Without knowing any of the reaction, I think Robbie said that Amorim said that we were. There you go. He didn't change because she saw we were on top.
We're 1-0 down.
Yeah. Well, let's not get Dave started again. We were just coming to close the podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you can laugh, at least he's laughing about it now. If you've enjoyed the podcast, if you can like and subscribe on YouTube, if you can subscribe on the audio pod and leave a review as well. We'll be back throughout the summer, like I said, and I'll be back with Paul next week and probably with Dave at some point next week as well to talk about this delightful season, which we'll all remember very fondly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay well.